Hey, I'm Tim. This is Mugger Brewing. Follow me inside. This building was originally an A&P grocery built in 1947. Later became Advanced Auto, later became a pool hall, and now it is the centerpiece of our brewery.
Obviously, I love your beer, so if you didn't have good beer, I would be coming back, but you...
Agreed. I often say, I'll tell David, if we didn't make good beer, I'd cry myself to sleep at night, because it's too much work to not have good beer.
I'm Allan Cogan. Join me as I highlight small businesses with interviews on site at distilleries, breweries, and more. My mission is to share the stories of the awesome people behind the craft. Welcome to Crafted Conversations. Well, Tim.
Yes.
Mugger Brewing.
Yes, sir.
I'm so excited to be here, and thank you for having me, because I'm from Wisconsin. I moved to Virginia. And I've now moved to North Carolina. And in all that time, I've been visiting friends who live here in Sanford. And every time I've been in town, I come to Mugger and have a beer. So this is not my first time here.
Oh, good.
But it's my first time here as a resident of the area. So thank you for welcoming me.
Yeah, well, welcome. Love to have you here.
Yeah.
And I don't know where to start. My path kind of follows yours a little bit. You know, I've been working my way south as well.
Yeah? Where are you really from? You said New York.
Yeah, originally outside of Utica, New York. And, worked my way down to Virginia as well, in Charlottesville for graduate school. And then came to North Carolina to work in a community development program and help build one up in the county next door. And then... during that time, I brewed a lot of beer, not all of it terribly good. I met David, my business partner, who unfortunately couldn't join us today, but he brews great beer and had a lot of experience doing so. And we got together and we somehow got this place open in January 2018, and have been having a good time ever since.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, very cool. Was making beer always in the cards? Were you always a beer drinker, alcohol connoisseur?
You know, it's funny. I look back and I've always been sort of enchanted by beer, if you will.
That's a good way to put it.
Because we had some very I had some exciting times living in London at one point. I lived at London in 1995. And I got to see what the English pub culture was like. I worked illegally in a pub. During that time, I think the statute of limitations has passed on my being able to share that. And it was a really cool, the beer was fine. I'm not such a fan of British styles of beer, but
sure.
The beer was fine. And I appreciate what was being done with it, with a lot of sessionable beers that people could just kind of drink and have a conversation all afternoon long kind of thing. But what I got out of it was just kind of the stunning diversity of people that were coming into a pub and treating it as their community home. And so if I worked on a Saturday, you'd see a mom with a pram outside, she'd want something light to drink while she was walking around the neighborhood, just getting out of the house for the day. You'd see, we had a guy who I couldn't figure out what was going on for a long time. During the weekdays, he would sit in a corner booth and, young kids, like probably junior high to high school age kids, would come and sit with him. And I always thought this was the weirdest thing. What's going on? It's office hours. He was a local educator and he had kids coming in asking about their papers and stuff like that. They weren't drinking. They didn't care about that, but he wanted to drink and no one cared.
Yeah.
It's part of the culture.
Sure.
So, on the weekends, you get a lot of your young folks. Do we want to take a second? Yeah.
I mean, we are filming.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know whose kids these are, but they may need to.
You're filming right here? And that's so cool. So they need you to be real quiet, okay? Can you do
Yeah.
that for me? All right, please be very quiet.
It's funny
Thank
because
you, Kelly. Yeah, you knew what to say. Well, bye, guys. Thank you. Okay.
they knew we were filming.
I know. I know.
It's kids.
Yeah. Yep. They.
We are in
Anyway.
a live brewery that has just done a full 5K and event. So we are actually showcasing how awesome of a business person Tim is.
We're doing our best. We're doing our best, and we are family friendly. So this is actually a good example of kind of who we are. David loves the community pub concept just like I do. It was fun to see up front. The culture of it is what kind of captured me, because it wasn't, it wasn't a bunch of drunks. It wasn't, tailgating to, get absolutely blotto for, the football game, which is acceptable too. But,
Of course.
it's more than just that. Alcohol was a social lubricant, and it was something that people did as part of the course of their day-to-day business. It was background of life. And there were all sorts of cool cultural things that came along with that, which was always interesting and an interesting part about beer. But as an example, when I first got there, there would be people, I did some traveling to places outside of London, and you'd go to a pub and someone would start a conversation when you talk for a little bit, and then they kind of pick on you. Like in the South, they say they're picking a little bit. So they'd pick on you a little bit, and then they'd kind of be starting up a conversation that they'd start a conversation where they want to have like a little bit of a rumble with you, not in a bad way, but they want to start like a friendly fight conversation type thing. And the very first one for me was about music, and somebody went after me for my music choice, and rather assertively thinking, I was a young guy, and they thought I could handle it, but my first thought was like, whoa, buddy, like you need to chill out, right?
Right.
And later on I learned this is just, de rigueur, like people do this. So that's where I think my love of kind of the concept that we have, which is a much more kind of family friendly thing, and then the beer side of it. I used to go to New York City to visit friends and family and things like this, and they had a place there called Jekyll and Hyde. I think it's closed now, but it was oddly decorated, just kind of like our place is a little bit, but
Sure.
it was more sort of like werewolves and vampires and hands under glass, and just some, more like monster movie-ish.
Okay.
And it was always kind of cool because their beer list was from all over the world, and it just captured my I shouldn't say imagination. It really captured my heart, because I started drinking different things, and I said, how does this one thing that we call beer, like how does this get to be so many different things? Like I feel like I could be doing this my whole life and be challenged to find the very favorite thing that I'll love the most, right?
Sure.
So that's a little bit.
When you started, or when you had the genesis of starting a brewery, did you have a beer or a group of beers that you thought, I want to make this? I love this beer. I want to be known for this. That's my baby.
No, not necessarily, because I feel like that's one of those things that the conversation's never over with food or beverage.
Sure.
So it's always, what's the thing that you're passionate for now, right?
Yeah.
I don't think either David or I hold something out there and say like, this is going to be the best thing ever. And especially in this day and age where everything's very fleet.
Right.
So yeah, I don't think so necessarily. I did want from the beginning something that we have in front of us, our Loopy Lunatic Imperial IPA. I am a big fan of piney resinous hops.
Okay.
And that flies in the face of what we're doing as a beer industry, which was a lot of hazy IPAs, right? And we have one,
Of course.
but we are not, we have 18 beers on draft, and we have 2 IPAs out of all that. We have a West Coast and an East Coast. This is our West Coast. I like it because it has that piney resinous hop flavor, and and a big malt backbone. That's another thing I just have not found a lot of breweries that can really get that malt right. Oftentimes it just tastes very light,
Mm.
you know.
Yeah.
And I want something that catches my attention before it slithers down my throat, you know.
Yeah. Well,
So.
I think we should cheers to that with what we have
Well,
in front of
cheers,
us.
absolutely. Yeah, let me give you one of these. Sorry, we don't have a head on these beers. They've been sitting just a
here.
little bit. I like a little bit warmer beer. Oh, yeah,
Yeah, I like an IPA. Oh, it's very resiny.
yeah,
I like that a lot.
yeah, yeah. It is. It's gonna it's also gonna lace nicely down
Sure.
the glass. Always a sign of a good beer and some proteins as well. So
I like protein in my beer.
that
a
just makes you big and strong.
That's right. That's right. Tell me about the space, though. We talked a little bit about it earlier. I mean, this is such a cool place to bring, family. Like you said, family friendly. I've hung out here on Saturdays before. You have a food truck in the back. And one of the things I love about craft breweries and beer in general is that it's much less serious and formal than the spirits industry. And listen, I love my whiskey. I love my scotch. I love my elegant craft, whatever. But you can't really name things silly in the bourbon industry. And you can't have a place like this. It's much more lackadaisical in the craft beer community.
Yeah.
So tell me about the space.
Ooh, it's a lot of space. So, if you were to incorporate or talk about all of it, it's 11,000 square feet. Back here, 2,000 square feet,
Okay.
right? With another 2,000 of space above it. There's a small office for me that I rarely get to use, and a lot of storage space if you like carrying things up and downstairs. And yeah, and then we have our base floor, which this space is really interesting. Tells some neat stories. Before this building was here, it was the largest tobacco barn in Sanford, and it was one of three.
Wow.
At least by 1940, it was one of three. And the reason why that was important was because buyers would come here in the fall and they'd lay out all the tobacco, right? And they would rate and then purchase, right? So that's maybe not all in the day. I don't know the specifics of it, but that's what was happening. And if you look back at the newspapers from Sanford at that time, they would have special editions in the fall. They would urge farmers to, they would specifically gear their advertising to the tobacco farmers' wives and tell them, bring all your winter clothing down for dry cleaning. And while you're down here, go to this place. And, lots of people came into town for these buying events. So the Wilrick Hotel was very busy, and it was very much the center of community life because the tobacco industry was so big. There was even a tobacco dryer, like a unit that was specifically meant to be set in among a curing shed to dry out tobacco, and it was made here in Sanford. Yeah, so the industry was really all around and all about tobacco, right? At that time, one of the big events in Sanford's history was actually that building burning down. It burned down in May of 1935, and it was so hot it melted the windows on the store across the street. Yeah. The fire chief had a heart attack and died in the middle of the street that day.
Holy cow.
This was a day before volunteer and municipal fire departments. So they had a fire department coming all the way from Albemarle that came to put this fire out.
Wow.
Yeah. And what they would do is they put up prize money, and whoever got there first and put out the fire, they got the prize money. It's crazy. So, but anyway, that was, and what was great about this was it is not so much that it burned, but it burned in May, and tobacco season is in September.
Sure.
Right. So people were understandably scared because this was the lifeblood of the community. And so there were no banks in Sanford at the time. This was 1935, the middle of Great Depression. And a group of citizens got together and put up the money to rebuild it. So they rebuilt it on their own, and they got it ready in time for the tobacco harvest. So that was a big deal. So I like the bones behind this. When we were doing work on the building, in fact, we had to dig down to add some pipes, and you could see like this whole charred level of earth where they just threw the building down and just kept building on top of it. So that was part of it. And then, you know what, the A&P grocery, when I first started researching this, that tobacco barn was torn down and they built an A&P grocery. We're sitting at where the back of it would have been.
Okay.
And, you know, that was a center of life and activity too. The economic development director here locally, Bob Joyce, for a long time at least, and somebody who's attracted a lot of the major industry that's come to Sanford, was telling me that his mom used to come to this A&P grocery. Their church was right where that public parking lot is up here. She would drop him off. He would go to the goat barn next door, which is now Bert's Antique Shop, right? And she would do her shopping here. So it's a little bit of small town story there.
Yeah.
And then the one last thing I'll add to that was the when A&P decided to locate elsewhere, and it's the A&P story is really the story of America too, because it started A&P in Sanford, started up a block up from here as a little tiny grocery store, right? And then it came here to like a 7,000 square foot building, and they decided this wasn't enough. So where Habitat Restore is today is where it went. And then I think it went to where Piggly Wiggly is, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and leaving behind big buildings like this, right? So, and that really reflects the nationalizing market in America. So I like that as part of the story. And then the last sort of feel-good thing that I like about this building is that when they decided this building wasn't big enough, A&P moved, Advanced Auto came in, right? You know, who cares? It's another auto parts store, right? But the owner of Advanced Auto, when I was doing research on this place, I got kind of curious because he and his wife actually bought the building. It wasn't the company. They bought the building. So that's the way things were done back then. And Advanced Auto was a small company out of Roanoke, Virginia, looking to expand just a little bit, right? Well, what's interesting about him, Mr. Taubman, was he was celebrated in the 90s when he passed. He had a very big and very nice obituary in the New York Times because he allowed, I forget if it was 50 or 100 Jews coming from Europe fleeing the Holocaust to say that he was their family member. And he did this at great risk to himself and his company, but he personally did that to make sure, you know, they had a safe place to be. And I really like the fact that his name appears on, you know, the past deed for this building. You know, he came here and saw a promise in this place, and also he had a role to play in this building and what it is today. So those are some of the nice little backstories that I think are I don't know, kind of cool about our building. That's a space. Today, 7,000 square feet of inside space. We do everything here. You know, you talk about beer, yoga, lately a little bit of stitch and bitch. That's a popular thing. You can play ping pong. You can play cornhole. We do chili cook-offs. I mean, I kind of get tongue-tied because we do so much. We're doing a beer and taco pairing tonight. We do some beer pairing events in the colder months, and then in the warmer months we do you know, some large-scale music festivals. We do a barbecue cookout. That's a big deal. Yeah, just we try to do as much as possible. And then today's event was a 5K, and we knew we weren't going to sell like a lot of beer, right? That's not kind of the point.
Right.
The point was we're a warm space. They can begin and end here. They can use our restrooms. People can get warm, see the place, talk to one another comfortably. It's just nice. And
come back later and have a beer.
That's the hope. Yes. If you're having your dry January, we'll see you soon.
Yeah.
But yeah, those sort of things. And we like to be a center of community. We do blood drives here. You know, we've basically, if you come and ask us, can I do something? I may ask you some questions about how we do that, but 9 times out of 10, we're amenable to helping somebody, right?
Yeah. Well, I will say every time I've been here, it has been crowded, and it's awesome.
Good.
And the most notable event that I remember being here with my my friends' kids, who I lovingly call them my nieces and nephews because we're that close. We were here for, was it last year or the year before, your Halloween event.
Oh yeah.
We all dressed up. I think we were all like dressed as cows.
Yeah.
So it was the whole floor was open. The kids were dancing, having a good time, and it's like,
that's when we did the kids dance parties.
Yes.
I forget. That's one of my favorite events too. We don't do it as much, but it's always fun because the first hour is always the. We've got a great friend of mine who just loves buying DJ equipment. Yeah, I think he's slightly addicted to it. So what we pay him just goes back into the kitty to do whatever. He's always telling me the most outrageous things that he's buying next. So, but he's got kids, and so he loves doing the dance parties. He curates a list of music for the kids. And I'm like, these kids have no idea the preparation and playing that went into their fun today. But it's pretty wild. And the first hour is awesome because all the parents are getting out there with their kids and, doing, photos and TikToking and all sorts of stuff. And it's nice. Everyone's happy. The kids hopefully dance like a bunch of idiots and get themselves tired out. That's our gift to the parents for buying a beer, yeah. So I'm glad you've seen us at our best.
Yeah. Oh,
so
yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
I obviously I love your beer. So if you didn't have good beer, I would be coming back. But you
agreed. I often say I'll tell David, I said if we didn't make good beer, I'd cry myself to sleep at night because it's too much work to not have good beer.
Now I know you have a brewmaster and an assistant brewmaster and all that stuff.
Yeah.
As the owner, are you still hands on in the process, or do you let them have the long leash and like, hey guys, do what you want?
Well, we do. I mean, we talk about just yesterday. In fact, we had our year of beer conversation, which is sort of a heads up to say like, what are the things that we want to do this year? Because we have our own, we have 18 drafts, right? But we cycle through a fair amount, and we've done, I forget now how many different styles of beer, something like 65 or 6 styles of beer. And, at this point, it's just an amazing amount of creativity. So we sit down and we say, okay, what are our opportunities that we know we have to work with this year? So, for instance, what kind of collaborations do we want to do? What are some trends? What are some things that you just like? You know. So we sat down yesterday, and it's a mix of like some new beer concepts with how do we bring back, what are some old favorites that we want to bring back? For instance, we have a Scottish ale. So I forget which pence it is. There's 3 different versions, but our Scottish ale called Drop It Like It's Scott is a slightly smoked version of a Scottish ale.
Okay.
And it is tasty, and we've only had it on I think twice so far in our 7-year history. And then another one that was extremely popular is a wheat beer with lemongrass, and that's called Nothing Good Ever Happens in a Van. And that became very popular, if only because of the name, but the name just got the beer in people's hands. The beer itself got them to drink it. So.
Listen, I love naming conventions. A lot of this industry is like 90% marketing.
It is that, and I tell people that I get a lot of small business owners, and short little shout out to ourselves. We were the small business of the year for Sanford last year.
Oh, congrats!
Which you have to be in business for 6 years to get the award, and yeah, so that's actually something. We're very proud of.
You should be.
Right?
Yeah.
Took a lot of work. And then we get a lot of small business owners who come in and want to talk about it. They say, okay, we've seen you be successful. What can you help me with this thing or that thing? And increasingly, something that I realize is just people don't market enough. Even when I started out, with this business, in my head, I'm thinking we have great beer. Why, people need to discover us, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't think like how much you have to do in terms of getting your name out there. And you have to constantly be looking at like, well, what are my opportunities for getting in front of people, right? How do I make sure that, How do I make sure our brand is represented broadly and that everybody knows about us and knows what we're doing, and they want this, and they want the latest thing,
Yeah.
and it's especially urgent for volume businesses, right? When you're making your revenue at $5-6 a go with pints of beer, but it's true of everybody. And so many people get caught up in the same thing. They're so passionate about what they're doing, and they're so good at it. Like, you could have an amazing product and just not tell anybody, right?
Right.
And yet I find myself some weeks I'm spending at least 50 to 60% of my time finding new marketing opportunities. So that is a big deal. It's kind of the hammer I'm currently wielding. Everything looks like a nail because I'm like, marketing. That's everything that needs to be done. There's a lot more to it than that, but it could also be a symptom of, we've made it 7 years. I'm able to routinize a lot of the challenges that early businesses have. Now on to the next thing. What's the next thing? It's always marketing. So, as you said, that's kind of where we're always at.
Yeah, well, and we talked a little bit off camera about some of the reasons I'm doing this is I'm not going and talking to Miller or Coors or whatever because they don't need me and I don't need them. I'm more interested in the small business who doesn't know how to tell their own story.
Yeah,
and I love talking to people like yourself who doesn't have a PR firm behind them, who I have to get through. I emailed you directly, and I'm sitting down with you having a conversation. And I think part of the marketing that people lose sight on is your story makes your beer taste better. If I know you or you're behind the bar pouring my beer and I'm buying your beer, and you tell me, oh yeah, that's that new Belgian I made. It's a new recipe I came up with, a fever dream, and I made it. My wife and I are all these things. It makes me appreciate that craft more.
yeah.
And I think that is what a lot of the industry is lacking in selling yourself and your story.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't want to be public figures. You don't need to be.
I understand that completely. I'm really not that person. I'm very much, I've made a lot of friendships here. I'll give you an example. I made a lot of friendships here. A lot of people I adore dearly. And I also am constantly telling people, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that. And it's not because of work obligations. It's because after 7 years, I understand that I need something for myself, which is a lot of quiet time. In order to recharge, I'm introverted. I'm extroverted in certain situations, right? When I'm here, you have to be, right?
Yep.
I can't hide anywhere, and nor do I want to.
Right.
I want to be out there hearing like what's going on in the community. I'm always curious, like what's going on with your business, with your family. What are you seeing out there? What are we doing wrong? Or what are we doing right? You can never get enough information as a business owner, right? And so that lends itself to also have those conversations that lead you to kind of that nice connection.
Yeah.
But also I always have pretty much every week some residual guilt from having to tell somebody, oh, I can't do that. And I know exactly what I'm doing when I'm not doing that. I'm sitting on the couch reading, I'm playing a video game. I'm watching something with my wife or going out to a meal with her. I need that too.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I understand like the reticence to do it. I understand also you have to find a work-life balance, and that's just it is what it is. But I agree 100%. It's always good if you can find a place where you find the owner, you get the straight poop on everything.
Oh yeah.
And
well, and your enthusiasm too speaks volumes. If I corner you in your brewery and you want to talk about your beer, and you're like, oh yeah, I love this, and I can get that energy off of you, I'm more likely to enjoy your beer.
Yeah.
If you're standoffish and like, nah, it's just a side gig or whatever, like,
right,
okay,
right.
cool.
Yeah. No, I get that. And both David, I'm sorry you're missing David because he is exactly the same way. We are we're in a way we're peas in a pod because we both are very passionate about beer and we feel this very deeply, which is it's very odd that we came together about that one thing. And just both fervently believe, and with service too, because he's, if you think you've had good service here, it's a lot of it a lot of that goes back to David and his history with hospitality,
Okay.
and what he's seen and what he wants to demand. And if you haven't seen it, it's just because we've maybe not hit the right note at that time, or we haven't done a good job and can always do better, kind of thing. But it is exciting for both of us. It's exciting to see that this place is still doing well after 7 years, and a lot has happened in those 7 years, right? So
7 years feels like 20 years ago.
right, yeah. But it's also exciting that we're doing, some of the same things, and I see new things happening all the time. This is the best place to get to know what's happening in life. And one of the coolest things I think I've seen as an emerging trend. Now, I'm not here every night. I've just admitted that anyway, and saying that I duck out and tell people, oh, I can't do that.
Yep.
And go sit home on the couch. But I mean, I'm also here quite a bit in evenings for events or to meet people for things. And I really love seeing families come in with their kids who are now living at home.
Yeah.
Right? It's one of my favorite things. I know, like, people kind of beat up younger generations a little bit, but one of the things that's happening that I don't think I would have ever kind of thought of or expected is, so a lot of young people who have very close relationships with their parents now, that are living at home, whether before or after or during whatever their college years might be. And we had a young lady come in here maybe a month, 6 weeks ago, and she was in here, and then this older gentleman sat down next to her, and I thought, okay, this is different sort of setup. What's going on here? That was her dad. And one of the cool things was, they're talking for a bit, and I don't think she'd been here before, because he's kind of talking animatedly and showing her stuff. And then he grabs her and says, you could see he's like gesturing, and they go up front, and there's this chest that's on the far side of the bar, up by our front windows, and I had at my house, I had some sort of animal had come through at some point and littered our lower backyard with bones. All these dried animal bones just everywhere. So I put them in a bucket. I brought them up here, and I had this chest, and I made a plexiglass top for it, and took the top off, made a plexiglass top. So, it's all carved on the outside with different scenes, but then on the top you can see inside. So I just threw the bones inside. So you can't really tell until you're right up above it that it's filled with bones. Well, he brought her up there and showed her, like, you could see him demonstrate to it, and the look on her face was just like, wow, that's really cool. And I thought, this is the sweetest thing. And it's not like, I've seen this happen 2 or 3 times, not with that specific scene, but those two stand out because they were so demonstrative, and it was so much fun just watching them. Like, you could just tell that the conversation was.
Yeah.
But that's one of the cool things about being here and being a community spot. And one of the cool things that you see develop is, like, I'd never see that staying at home, Right. And it's one of the cool things about being here is you get a sense of what the world is like right now.
Yes.
And I love that. I love it as much as the beer.
Hey y'all, Allan Cogan here with Crafted Conversations. If you want to support the show and the mission of sharing the stories of craft, head over to buymeacoffee.com/craftedconvos. I'd really appreciate throwing a couple bucks my way to help me pay for travel, the equipment that I use, the time that I spend editing, all the software that I use. I really appreciate any support you can give me. And if you can't afford a couple bucks, at least give me some feedback, or go over to your YouTube and subscribe, or follow us on Spotify. Anything helps to make sure that we share the story of craft and give these small business owners a little limelight and get them out on a platform that really showcases what they're doing. I can't do this without you guys or your support, so I would really appreciate you pitching in and helping out. So I'll see you out there, and I really appreciate it. Cheers. In true Milwaukee fashion, which is where I was born and raised, I'm a bowler. So the original social network being bowling. Mm-hmm. But I think that's kind of progressed into the craft space and craft beer, craft distillery, local watering hole. Because it's weird. My generation, I'm millennial at the tippy top of millennial, but like going out to a bar, a dive bar, like it's a Wisconsin thing, but
Yeah.
other smaller places don't really have that.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of Sanford specifically. There are bars here, but
Mm-hmm.
I think like going out, I think of this place.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if that's just a generational thing or the market has changed so much and it's not so much. I don't know. But I think you've been able to take advantage of that in a good way.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. I don't think it's all us.
Right.
There are other things to it, and obviously, it flies in the face of trends in which millennials buy. A healthy number of them just see alcohol as poison. I mean, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I've written to our Brewers Guild about it because I think they really need to be addressing some of these things head on. I don't have a problem with somebody not liking alcohol. That's not an issue for me. But I do have a serious issue with. I take issue with the possibility that like we've been very, very focused on biological body problems, right?
Yeah.
And very dismissive of the sort of problems that come from not being part of a good social network. So you're talking about bowling and things that have replaced bowling, like a Robert Putnam's bowling alone kind of thesis, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So and you see all like the Kiwanis, the Lions Club, Rotary, all of them are looking for new members.
Yep.
And it's very tough to find that because the younger generations haven't been brought along as joiners in quite the same way.
Right.
And the same thing is true with socializing, and that is where I see that's the only upsettedness I have about how people view the alcohol industry is that I don't need you to get drunk all the time.
No.
A beer or two is great.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's you spending time in our business, but also it's a social lubricant that brings people together. And yes, I understand, lack of moderation is an issue, and certainly everyone needs to be aware and careful.
But that's
right?
with everything.
That is with everything. But
Right.
the real danger that I see that is not being addressed, and it's much more intractable than just not drinking, is the problem we have that of like just flat out loneliness. There are so many people out there without somebody in their life, and you think like, oh, he's being dismissive of, not dismissive, but that's a trivial sort of thing. But there are literally places in America where the local health officials have called it a pandemic, and the reason for that is we need a network to do all sorts of things in our life, right? One very basic thing for me as a homeowner is I need a wide network because, gosh, I can't find a good contractor to do very basic stuff in my house. So I have to ask everybody, who are you using, right? That's a very basic thing. But also, we have a veterans group that's coming in here later this year that wants to pair up younger veterans with established veterans. And the whole intent is they need a network as they age out of the military, right? They need somebody that they can lean on for assistance. And a lot of times these are folks who are hardened by their time in the military and will not accept assistance from somebody who doesn't have that sort of life experience, right? So you see it in very specific circumstances. You see it in very generalized circumstances. I mean, when and by that, I mean, like, when I was growing up, I remember being bored, right?
Yeah.
I haven't been bored in a very long time. I have way too much stuff that I can do. Yep. And usually it's on a phone, it's a video game, it's on a screen, right? Yes. You can see we don't have any TVs in here.
Yeah.
No screens. And I think that makes people happy. I think boredom makes people happy because it challenges your mind to do some different things that it may need to do to stay healthy. And as an overlay on all of that, if you say, well, I don't really like alcohol, well, there are other options for you. You can go to your local gym or YMCA. If you're a senior, there are senior centers. There are groups for after school stuff, right? There's churches, but even churches are falling in attendance now. So nobody wants to get out and do things.
No.
Nobody's bored, right? And I feel like there's a healthy overlay between that and the alcohol industry. So when people say, well, I don't really want to go out and have a drink. Okay, you don't have to go out and have a drink and get drunk, but go out and maybe have a drink and loosen up a bit with some friends and maybe make some new friends, or maybe learn something about your community you didn't know, because we've been open 7 years and I spent 2 years developing this place. So I got 9 years into this place and I'm still learning things. I learned things today I didn't even know about this area. So it just, to me, it comes part and parcel with living a life that you are a member of a community, and to be happy, you have to live your life with other people, and finding people in your life that you enjoy is going to be very tough. It's never easy. So you need a lot, it's a numbers game.
Yeah.
You need to meet a lot of people
Yeah.
to make some connections where you said, oh, I really adore that person. I think their thoughts before they speak them, kind of thing. Those people are out there for you, right? But you won't do it. You won't find it sitting at home by and large. So that's where my upsettedness, if any, comes from. Yeah.
I totally agree. And I love the way you frame that, because, I mean, I'm a big proponent of community engagement. And like we were talking briefly about the current political climate, and we won't get into that. But my mantra around all those things that are happening today is that it doesn't matter who is in charge or doing the things that you may or may not like.
Mm-hmm.
What matters is, are you being a part of your community and going out and engaging, and you don't have to volunteer at a soup kitchen every day.
Nope.
But just go out there and be
Yeah.
aware of things, and take pride in where you live. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things I love about craft, is that, like, you're in Sanford. You own the space and you love the people in the area. And I'm actually curious, as a good segue, how receptive was Sanford and North Carolina to giving you a license and helping you out, and how did that process look? Because I've heard horror stories, but I've also heard that there are, like, nowadays in the year 2025, our Lord,
Uh-huh.
but in the 80s, I'm sure it was harder to get alcohol license than it is today.
Yeah, maybe so.
But
Well, I mean, the alcohol licensure part, I don't, I did not have any issues.
okay, good.
So that was not, the main issues we had were with a general contractor who wasn't competent. And, we continue to reap the benefit of that. But, on the other hand, I'm a big person I feel very strongly that gratitude is important for us to feel. And I'm grateful that we got the doors open when we did, and we were well received. Folks really loved us. We had one thing that a lot of people don't do, but we did. In the alcohol industry, I think you need that, is we had an attorney that we probably paid good money to come up with a very rock solid operating agreement. And if we needed anything, we picked up the phone and it got handled.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we owe something to Derek for helping us with all that. And yeah, so it just we really didn't have any big hurdles in that way. It was just sort of a constant sort of swapping out of things on, you build a budget, and it took about $1.25 million to open this place.
Wow.
Yeah. And, you not only have, I don't know the best way to put it, but, the main challenges we had were our general contractor just flat out didn't know what they were doing. And a great example of it was we had already had to eat a lot of unanticipated expenditure by putting $60,000 worth of HVAC in addition to $15,000 worth of metal work to get it lifted off the roof, which wasn't sufficient to holding it, which they didn't tell us. And then at the very end, they had put a line item for steam piping. All of our equipment is jacketed and steam heated.
Okay.
And so we needed steam piping. Well, they had put a number in there, $5,000 for steam piping. And it is a very efficient short run for steam piping, but anybody who's done steam piping before would have known that that number did have a 5 in it, but it was more like 45,000. So we were short by about $40,000 at the very end of our project and needed to open in about 3 or 4 weeks. So things like that were the biggest challenges that we faced.
Okay.
And, it really wasn't until COVID that we endured anything so kind of perspective changing in terms of how we thought about how we would run our business and so on.
No kidding.
Yeah.
It always impresses me, the juggling act that a small business can do. I mean,
Yeah.
You're saying you set a budget and then you blow through it within. I mean, it's such a common thread. And my curiosity in craft has always been, how are you able to balance the experimentation, the play, the new things with the cash register? Because it sells, right? Your top 4 beers. You have to have a hazy, you have to have a pilsner, you have to have a seltzer.
Yeah.
And then, but are you able to say, I'm going to try this new Doppelbock just for funsies? Like, are you able to? Like,
we don't ever say like, we'll never do that sort of thing.
Sure.
Although I say that, and I literally just said the other day, I don't care what we do on this brew program this year, but we're not doing another saison. Which I only say that not because we can't make good saisons. We make great saisons. It's that nobody orders them. People love to see a saison on the menu. I think it's an indicator for them that this is a fancy place, right? And you see a lot of saisons with very nice ingredients because they have all these like special peppercorns that have been sourced from Africa and lavender that's come from the farm down the street and these sort of things, right? Just exceptional ingredients, and they'll be left sitting on like 5 barrels of it 2 years later because just nobody wants that. I mean, they love to see it, and I agree. I love to see that on the menu, and then I go on to the thing I want to have, right? Which is quite often a Belgian style. If I see that, if I see a brewery offers more than one Belgian beer, I'll lean into that a bit. That's our menu. We're very Belgian heavy.
Sure.
And it's exciting if you're a craft beer person to find these places. In my opinion, this is just me sharing, but I think what's exciting about it is that flavor profile that you get from yeast, especially because the Belgian styles are typically very yeast driven styles.
Yeah.
And I think that's exciting because so many other styles you get, the hops play a prominent role, or the malt plays a prominent role, the water profile plays a prominent role, or maybe the additional ingredients, whether it be spices or fruit or something like this. Those all play roles. But in Belgian beer, that you're more likely than not to see the yeast take center stage, and that's fun to see. It's fun to see how breweries, American breweries, play with that. I tend to think we're fairly respectful of the Belgian tradition, much more so than maybe some other beer styles.
Sure.
Right. So that's where we end up a little bit heavy on the Belgian side of things.
Love it. I like I said, I'm always curious about the experimentation side and the trying new things side, and how. I mean, to me, getting into a business where I have to pay my overhead, and then feeling like you're boxed into the only beers you can make, but then also knowing that the market likes new things.
Well, and I think that goes to the way you think about beer. So for us, you have to make a beer that people are going to want two or more of, right?
Right.
There's really no point in making a beer. So I know a brewery here in the Sandhills of North Carolina that makes delicious beer, but it is too, I don't want to say too flavorful, but it is kind of, it's too much. Like I have to put it down. I love the flavors. There's never a question that they have done an exceptional job of finding the flavor combination that's going to make a great beer. But the problem is the beers don't don't finish dry, right? They don't leave you wanting more, and they're too flavorful, right? So your palate is something that, like, we've been drinking the Loopy Lunatic for a while, right?
Yeah, yeah.
My tongue is just coated with malt and hops,
Yep.
right? And I love it. It's tasty, but it's not cloyingly sweet.
Right.
I still want more.
Yep.
And that is the challenge for breweries. I think a lot of craft brewers came out and they said, we're going to do massively creative things. And there are places that do things just as creative, more creative than us, right? But I don't know how drinkable that is. The peanut butter and jelly sour that somebody brought to me one day, and I said, and it came out in clumps from the can. So it's not only just like visually not appealing,
Right. Yeah.
but also, I don't want one of them. I want a taste, but certainly I don't want two. And that's the challenge is you want people to have a couple beers. That's the whole point.
That's how I am with a lot of porters. I love a good chocolate coconut porter in the winter by the fireplace, whatever. I like that.
Yeah.
But I won't have a full pint of it. I just can't. And that's a me thing.
Yeah.
But I totally get that because you want a beer that almost makes you salivate for more in a way.
Well, and also, one thing that, and you and I may differ on this, but I feel like one thing that David does very well with his beers is he knows how to make a beautiful malty beer, right? And that is, I can't believe that it would be a challenge, but really, I mean, we made a beer one year for to celebrate the side-by-side challenge that Deep River Sporting Clays does here in Sanford, north of town. And they're great. It's a lot of fun to go there. Absolutely, you've got to go. If you've not been, you will probably not have a better time outside than doing Sporting Clays. So we made a beer to celebrate this massive event they do. It's an international event. People don't know that. I mean, there are folks coming from all over the world to come participate in it in little old Sanford. And so it just happened to happen the year that we did it. April 2020 was the year that we were going to celebrate it. So we created a beer called Thunder Stick. It's a stick style beer, but it's shooting sports, so Thunder Stick was appropriate.
Right.
Okay. That beer was so deliciously malty. It was like a malted milk ball on your tongue. And somehow David made it so that you got all that delicious malt goodness without it being overpoweringly sweet. You wanted to pick up the glass again and say, I need a little bit more of that. And I don't see, I feel like that's one of the special weapons that we don't take advantage of enough because you don't see that very often. You don't see craft breweries, and I have no idea why this is because this should be a strength of craft breweries, being able to make a really malt bomb of a beer and have you just say, oh man, like that is everything I wanted. It's got those crystal malts. It's got some golden promise in it. It's just all that sort of malt sweetness, and it just makes you smile. You can tell I'm delighted by it.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that makes us stand out, and we never really, it's sad, we don't talk about it enough, because it really is a distinguishing thing. And so it made me think about it, your comment about porter, and our porter that we have is really good. It used to be called Amor Fati. Now it's called Run with the Rubes. We can call it whatever we want. I don't care. It is a malty treat.
Okay.
And that is it. And folks love it. And they'll come in and just have one. They'll have one. And they will enjoy every bit of it. It's got all that great lacing down the side, and it's just fantastic. But it's also not something I want all the time.
Exactly.
So,
Right.
as you say, if people are always looking for something new, Folks are always looking for a light beer. Hey Buddy Golden Ale is always our best selling beer.
Sure.
Sometimes our juicy IPA, our hazy style, sometimes it gets close, but it really can't knock Hey Buddy off the perch for 7 years now. And David's done a really great Pilsner. We've got a Kolsch right now that is just killer. It is so good. Beers, one thing that, you talk about the small business element of it, right? And one of the interesting things that I don't know if people realize is that, like, you're maintaining a draft wall in our instance. And then for us, some places will go like as high as like 50% of their beers are IPAs or pale ales, right? Are very hop heavy, right?
Yep.
We are not that place. Okay. Our drafts are split between light beers and sours and a couple dark beers and then Belgians.
Right.
Okay. If I missed hoppy beers, it's because we have 2 and sometimes 3, right? And then, so you're talking about like what new beers do you do? What new beers do you introduce? Well, they have to be able to fit into one of those slots, right? And we can't get too off balance, because if you have like 5 sours, then you're got to take it away from somewhere, right?
Yeah, right.
And we can never have any less really than 2 dark beers, but you really don't want that much more,
Right.
because for whatever reason, there's a whole group of people out there who just see a black beer and say, "Oh, that's heavy. I'm not going to drink that. It's too heavy."
Oh, yeah.
And even if Guinness is like the lightest beer there is out there, they don't care. So you can't have so much of your menu devoted to that. So that's a consideration as well.
Is that more of a market analysis on your part for the bottom line, or is it more so just a feeling thermometer of like, you know what, I want to have these beers on tap right now because I'm proud of them? Is that a balancing act?
Well, I think for us, the one of the central organizing things was 2 things. One, you don't you always want to have you want to have something that's readily available for people who want that style. Right. So if we can get a diverse menu, then we can at least be adjacent to a lot of folks who want one thing or another. So there's that. The other thing is, every new beer that we put out cannibalizes another beer on the menu because people want to try the new thing, right?
Yep.
And so that's wonderful. I love that idea. Also, it just, you end up with, okay, we really got to push this beer because we have like 2 sixtels of it left. And, people loved it. This was like our number 2 or 3 beer just like 3 or 4 months ago. And now it's like the redheaded stepchild of the bunch because we've got all these other beers that people want to have. Right. So, and it's funny, you can tell that from our marketing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Every so often you see, I'll push a beer that we haven't had like much attention to for a while, right? I'll say, "Oh, remember this," kind of thing,
Right?
And that's me saying, like, "Okay, well, we got all these other beers that we want to do, but we can't really deliver them to you until you drink this one." So,
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, before we let these get too warm, you should probably tell me what these are, because I'm getting thirsty.
Oh boy, I gotta see
almost finished my IPA.
Oh yeah. So where do you want to start? The sours are closest to you.
Okay.
The Belgians are furthest.
Okay. Well, let's start with the.
You want to start with sours?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So the one closest to you is Brutal Zed's Sour Saison. One thing you should know about us: we do not let a name stand between us and whatever we want to do. So, is there such a thing as a sour saison? There is now.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And this is just a straight kettle sour. That's all it is. Nothing too complex. It's hopped, right? But all of our sours are slightly sour. Of all our sours, this is probably the one that has probably the most bite to it.
Pucker.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
I remember going to the Funkatorium maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago when it first opened, and walking in and seeing all the hipsters up at the bar with their skinny jeans and stuff like this, and everyone looked freaking miserable. And I remember David telling me, like, he's like, well, I really think we got to do some sours. And I'm like, oh, Lord, I said, we can't do that. I've seen what that looks like, and these people are miserable. They're not even enjoying their beer. He's like, no. He's like, that's way too sour. And he was right. It was too low a pH. Ours are slightly sour. What I like to say about Brutal Zeds is that it has the same sort of crisp acidity that like a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc would have.
That's a very good comparison. Yeah, I'm not gonna do a review or tasting note of it, but if I was gonna pull something from my brain, you did. That is like a Sauvignon Blanc. That's wow.
You know the other thing that I realized about that, and this beer is so funny. We're in a very rural area.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
You look at a light map of the East Coast, and it's really dark on this area, which I love it. I love that about this.
Yep.
About this area. It's still small town America.
Yep.
But you get so many folks who just have not experienced beer before, and they don't know the full range of things. And I find that there are folks that know absolutely nothing about beer, could give a lick about craft beer or whatever. And this beer hits them hard, and they love it. They love it. And I don't know why that is. It's sort of like, when you belly up to the bar, if you are as country as can be, I'm going to throw that beer in front of you first, even though it's pretty radical in terms of what beer is.
Right.
But it's a great way to just peel back someone's brain and say, hey, check this out. This is also beer. Right? You may be used to Bud or Coors Light, whatever, American corn generated beer we have. And this is something special. So
yeah, it's got that twang to it. You said country. I said I hear that twang.
it does. It does.
That's good.
And I started, I did it at first just as sort of a radical experiment because I was serving it to people who were wine drinkers. By and large, there were a lot of people who were like, oh, I like my white wine, blah, blah, blah. I said, you know what? You should try this as well. And a lot of times it worked. And then that cracked them open to be like, you know what? Sours are very light. They kind of realize the very not much body to it. It has that same sort of thing that they like with a lot of white wines.
Yeah, it's very effervescent in a way. I love that. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I love my sours, but I love that it's not an offensive sour. It doesn't make you,
right. But you want more. One, another thing David does well is everything that goes into a food or beverage item is a tool, including alcohol.
100%.
And the alcohol can really play a role in some of these beers as a drying effect. The higher alcohol you have, the more it, evaporates from your palate and has a drying effect. And so David does a very good job of engineering a beer that if it has a little bit higher alcohol content, that's above 7. So if it has a little bit higher alcohol content, he'll use that to good effect so that it's drying to the palate and you want another one. Again, the 2 or 3 beer thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So this one's a sour too.
Yes. So this is called Murder of Crows.
I was going to say it looks like a Murder of Crows.
Yeah. This is so how to best describe this? Do you know those there's a gift you sometimes get in your stocking at Christmas. It's a chocolate orange and you can smash them and the pieces open up.
Yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh. Yep.
That is the concept behind this beer. I think it's a very odd thing to have as a sour, but this was our assistant brewer, Katie Harper, did this beer, and it is extremely popular in part because it's such an odd duck. Because you have it at first, yep, that's exactly what people do. They look at it, they're like, okay, I'm not sure because this is not a flavor combination, but chocolate and orange and soured, and we only use real fruit. So we're using mandarin orange puree. And when we brew this, and the acidity on this beer is, I think probably not even as low as the mandarin fruit that we're using. That's another challenge in brewing, is getting the pH right.
Right.
So that it's not puckeringly sour or what have you. But it's an odd bird, right?
It's so different. It's almost brain breaking.
It is.
And the one thing I'll say, the orange is more present than the chocolate to me.
Yes, I would say that's probably correct. It may have to do with it sitting for a little bit,
Yeah,
and,
maybe.
and warming up.
The biggest thing that's odd to me though is the finish is drying, and it makes you want more. I like this. I don't know if I would have more than 2 of these.
Right.
Because this is something that I would order. Like I would go to a craft brewery and see it and go, "What the hell?" and order it.
Yeah.
And then, oh, this is good, but it probably wouldn't be a go-to.
Yeah.
But that's so different. And
Oddly, for many people now, it is a go-to.
really,
Yeah, and I think actually the reason why I think maybe what's going on with the tasting of that is that when you try new things, your body wants to know, what are these new things getting inside me, and one of those is the first thing you reach for is, okay, I get orange, okay, I get the acidity. Orange, that's it, because no one puts together sour with chocolate.
no,
Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
and it's also kind of throwing me off the visual. Like I don't. How often do you see a sour that's that dark?
Right. Well, and I will say, so that's, we're very style adjacent. So when we do, the BJCP style guide lists, I forget how many, 60 some styles, right? And we don't enter a lot of beer competitions because our beers are not typically to style. Yeah. So we don't let style get in the way of making a great beer. So there's just things that we do. It could be we have a little bit higher alcohol content, or could be we have a less alcohol content. Could be we wanted to do fruit in that particular style. Could be it's less hopped or more hopped. Could be the color, because SRMs are a part of it too. But we've entered competitions and our beers win, but they don't win in the category that we put them in, and that's just the nature of things. We've kind of have stayed away from that, and I'm fine with it because I don't think the awards mean as much as they used to. I think in the beginning, people paid much more close attention to see what were the very best beers being produced, and for better or for worse, I don't think there is as much attention. It is something to be celebrated anytime you win, but for us, it takes us kind of out of the running for most everything.
I honestly, I think that's a selling point, because
Could be.
you're not in a box,
We are not in a box.
and
No.
that's good.
Yeah.
It'd be really nice to say I made this pilsner and it won gold for a pilsner. All right, cool. Yeah. But if you make a pilsner that's like pilsner adjacent and has something different, I'm just using pilsner as an example because it's a basic beer, but I don't know, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Wear that with pride.
There are also things, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I mean, there are things that David does in the engineering of these beers that, doesn't always, we're not as constrained by style limitations, so we can be more efficient and still produce a good beverage, right?
Sure.
I'm still appalled by reading posts on forums by people who talk about this whatever volume usage of ingredients they had for a particular beer. I'm like, why would you do that? You have to make money. You have to pay your staff and keep the lights on. Like, what? Why would you make a beverage that you're going to end up selling at $7 or $8, and you still will barely recoup your cost?
Right.
So they was very good with being a savvy businessman and a brewer. So
Fair enough. All right, so we got
the last two.
Yes.
Okay, so this one is we call it Brew Jaja, which takes a little bit of explanation. This ends up on our Belgian menu. Okay, and you'll definitely want to take in the aroma before you taste. Yep.
Ooh.
So little banana heavy.
Very
right?
banana heavy.
Yes, but that quickly disappears. So what this is this was a collaboration beer with the restaurant we're doing our taco pairing with tonight, Tacos El Primo. They have been in business here in Sanford for 25 years, serving homemade recipes. This is like our 4th year doing a taco pairing with them. I've known the family for 7 years now. I only just found out this year they have a secret menu.
What?
God bless. Anyway,
this is information I need. I just moved here.
Yeah. Well, you've got to. You have to. If you haven't been before, you've got to go to Tacos El Primo.
Okay.
It's just like a little hut on Horner Boulevard.
I've driven by it many times.
Yeah.
It's made time yet.
So it's so worth it. They do an awesome job, and they sponsored our festival beer at Carolina Indie Fest, a big music festival we do twice a year. That in the fall they did this. We did a collaboration, and they know that David loves Belgian beers. They love Belgian beers, but they wanted to do a Mexican Belgian mashup, and that's what that is. So it is a lightened corn base. And then using some Abbey Ale yeast to express the character of a Belgian beer. That was not always as banana heavy as it is. And even the banana is starting to so this beer has evolved several times so far. Yeah. It has a nice round fruit flavor outside of bananas. And it tastes very shoof. If you like the Schoof Belgian beers.
Yeah.
But you have to get past the initial banana to it to get to this nice round fruit flavor. And then it's intriguing because you don't lighten the body of a Belgian beer typically. You let it ferment out cleanly, and that's what you have. But this has that sort of bigger but also lighter taste that comes from a North American lager, but with all the full flavor of a Belgian yeast style.
Yeah.
So it's an intriguing little thing. It's not a mind breaker necessarily.
No.
But I've really enjoyed it. It's been fun to play around with that beer.
Had you not told me that was a Belgian,
Mm-hmm.
I think my brain and my flavor profile goes to thinking that's a Mexican lager.
Yeah.
It has a lot of characters of a Mexican lager.
Uh-huh.
But then you say Belgian, then I get, I see that.
Some of the esters are there.
Yeah.
Right? But the body is very North American lager.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Very interesting. It's good.
Yeah. So a good counterpoint to that is this last beer. This is our Belgian triple.
Okay.
Or tripel if you are so moved. This beer, so Untapped did their own sort of promotional thing last year where they took a look at how beers were rated in states by style. And this is the top rated Belgian triple in North Carolina. And in fact, this is one of our most beloved beers. It is amazing because you really can't tell. You don't get a hint of alcohol despite it being a 9% beer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's dangerous. We call it Haster Disaster. When we first started serving it, I don't know if Sanford had many 9% beers. So, folks would come up and get a couple. But if you came up and got a third, the bartender might yell Haster Disaster just to let folks know something was coming. Maybe a little bit of oversharing, too friendly kind of thing. I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, it's a nice, I like to say it has a honey finish, but it has a lot of fun things going on with it. And it's so drinkable. It's too easy drinking.
Man, for 9%.
Right.
You're right. That is dangerous.
You don't get a hint of it, right? You think
No.
you're drinking maybe like 5-6% at most.
Yeah. And it has that real thick honey taste. Oh my God. That's amazing.
Right.
But
that's part of that alcohol drying effect too.
Right.
That I think David's really perfected that. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah. That's amazing. I think that my favorite that I've tried so far.
It should be.
I'm trying to remember if I've had this here before. I probably have. I sometimes order based on ABV because it gets you there faster and saves money.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. We have a Belgian quad, right?
Sure.
Called Wicked Pitch. And when we go to places that try their hand at a Belgian quad, not everybody does. And if I'm reasonably certain they can do a good one, I'm going to start there.
Yeah, right.
Because that's I don't want to at the end. I want to be able to enjoy it. I can enjoy lower ABV beers because I know what's going on with them.
Right.
But the our wicked pitch of the yeast is, if I'm going to have it, that's going to be the first beer of the evening. Also to be respected very much so at 12%. For whatever reason, I don't know why, but for me, a 12% beer hits me a lot harder than, let's say, if I had a martini or something like this.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, despite the alcohol difference. And,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can sit with some friends and power through a bottle of bourbon and have no cast strength
Yeah.
and have no issues over the course of 5-6 hours.
Wow.
But if I have 2 or 3 9+% beers, for whatever reason, my body is like, hey, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And anyway, I'm the same way, but it's probably the way the alcohol metabolizes, science that I don't understand. But that's very good. That's very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
I'm curious because I've traveled around, and one thing that always is striking to me is the difference in alcohol laws across the states. Liquor specifically is very weird, especially in North Carolina, as an ABC state. Where I come from, Wisconsin, you could buy Everclear at a Walmart.
Nice. I hope we get there one day.
Where it should, as it should be. But I've been to places where there's actual local ordinances or even state law that requires a restriction on number of beers you can sell at a percentage.
Yeah. No such thing here, although Sean Wilson, who does Full Steam Brewing up in Durham, he is a pioneer in beer in North Carolina and should be roundly applauded for getting us to a place where we can do a style like this, because he helped push through the Pop the Cap law, which I forget was 2008 or 2009, and made it possible for breweries to create beers over, was it 6%? Yeah, it was shocking. I think at the time, it was us and Utah and maybe one other place that had these very restrictive beer ABV levels. So, I mean, not everybody wants a barley wine,
Right.
but you also want the ability to have something different. Beer's not just your North American lagers, right? It's not just your Negro Modelo and your Coors Light and all that. As we talked about at the beginning, that's what enchanted me about beer, as it can be so much.
Exactly.
Right? So
there's a lot of laws that are old and prohibitive. I don't know why it's been taking so long to get progression in that area, but I'm hopeful that the winds of change are here.
Well, and it's very, craft breweries were very disruptive. That's one of the things that was said when we were, when we first opened. We disrupted a lot of stuff by opening, right? Oh, yeah. And disrupted the way people thought about going out in Sanford. Disruptive about like what a business could be tasked with doing here, and then disruptive with just basically how, what are you brewing? Like, why is it that way? And do we want that? Do we want that in our lives? So yeah, I think that gets the heart of it. I think some of that has now calmed down, although the tweaks that are being done to alcohol law in North Carolina seem to be in the right direction. By that I mean the law seems to make a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
There's not as many kookamanny things out there. And it isn't, hopefully it's not even as bad to, for instance, sign up with a distributor and have a distributor arrangement, because for a long time in North Carolina, those sort of arrangements were anathema to craft breweries. So
yeah, and I mean, I've been to states like West Virginia that still have 1830 alcohol laws on the books that have, like, they're not really enforced, but they're there. So then when a brewery or distillery or winery tries to open in West Virginia, it's like, and then you look at the books. There's a reason why there's only like, I want to say 6 or 7 distilleries and maybe 25 breweries statewide.
Whoa.
West Virginia is in the past.
Well, I've seen that for New Jersey has some crazy laws,
Yeah.
and South Carolina during the pandemic also had some crazy stuff. But a lot of these laws were formed with whiskey in mind, and whiskey became a very basically synonymous with alcoholism and largely it was men over drinking, like leaving their wives and kids behind, just leaving a problem for other people to solve. And that's what brought prohibition about. It was abuse of that. And also, there were things that were happening at that time. Like, we didn't know what PTSD was. We didn't know a lot of these. So there were a lot of people that were self-medicating that had come through some pretty traumatic experiences. Life was much, much tougher back then.
Oh yeah,
And
right on the heels of World War One
yeah.
ending.
Yes, right, and even before that, I'm reading a book about called the American Reckoning, or maybe it's called Western Reckoning. It's about a guy with the last name Elliot, who's the author, and he was relating stories about, at one point in this history book, about women and their settling in the West and what it meant for women, because they were by and large on their own. They would settle out West. Their husband would go out to try and find work, and sometimes they came back in pretty bad shape because the work that they had was very tough. They would be subjected to really poor conditions, and he gives a number of accounts where women were left with husbands who were just basically mad. They could not handle their circumstance anymore. What we might now know is a very severe PTSD case, right? But life wasn't treasured in quite the same way at that time, and in those circumstances. So you look at that and you say, okay, there were a lot of people who had, without any better way of putting it, probably good reason to drink and dissociate from the stuff that they had in front of them.
Yeah.
And I could see a backlash from that with prohibition.
Oh, for sure.
But it also didn't do a whole lot for our laws. And I tend to think it made us poorer as a people in a social sense as well.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was just with some friends last night. We were watching, what's a series called? American Primeval.
Okay.
It's on Netflix.
Oh, I know exactly. Yes.
It's very violent and graphic.
I haven't seen it yet. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's the Mormons.
The Mormon Wars.
And there's and Native Americans are coming through, and I'm sure the federal government's coming in at some point.
Oh, yeah. The U.S. Army's involved. It's 1830s to 50s-ish.
Yeah.
And it is rough. And we were all having a discussion about how life would be like that. But like back then, we would love to go visit the time machine.
Right.
Marty McFly and... But
you wouldn't want to live back
I wouldn't
then.
want to live there. But there's something interesting to me about the freedom and independence of back then. Traveling west and then just doing the thing. I'm going to go out and hunt and come back, and there's no red tape about it. Now, obviously, we are a civilized nation. We have restrictions and laws and regulations for reasons that we've all agreed on, a social contract, all that stuff. But there's also something beautiful about, like, I'm on my own with my family or my clan.
Oh yeah.
And so, but also they didn't have air conditioning, so nah.
Well, in the northern U.S., that wasn't as much of an issue, but yeah, this book I'll get it to you. The American West is an amazing mix, and it's a shocking. What's shocking about it is how informative it is about today's politics. Because you see a lot of it, you see a lot of the same themes popping up today, maybe even more resonant than they ever have been before.
Right.
And there's there's people who are very much like at their core, they have that desire for freedom and self-sufficiency and so on. And then they just a lot of them run right smack into the problem of, in an uncivilized area, this world is a lot bigger than you, and your circumstance is fairly contingent upon things that you have no control over. And it's breathtaking and bold and all the things that you associate with the U.S., both good and bad. Yep. And Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. And what one thing that brought me to this, brought North Carolina into the conversation was last night was a friend of mine that grew up in Western North Carolina in Murphy, and he relayed, I'm not going to get too far into the details, but he relayed a story about a family member of his. And basically, at the time, they were, 1830s maybe, out west. And, the things that happened in Western North Carolina, 1830s, was basically the frontier. Right? That was still the frontier, and the way people thought and the things that they did. And you think that really, in some ways, I know it's 200 years ago, but it doesn't seem that far off.
It's not.
Yeah.
In the
So it's
grand
just,
scheme.
yeah. So it's exciting. It's actually horrifying and mortifying and all those things. But yeah, I can see why you like that show, and it's next up for me too.
Yeah,
So.
I just like that time period. I also like the idea of how we have to have 7 kids because 6 will die.
Yeah, that was oh my Lord. Yeah, that was a whole nother thing. I've wondered. I had somebody tell me once that in medieval artwork, if you look at like renderings of the Christ child, he is typically in a crib or a crate or something, and across the room from the Virgin Mary,
Right.
and his family.
Yeah.
And the talent, as I was told, like that was partly because people would give great distance between themselves and their young ones because they didn't want to. They knew that child stood a tough chance to become an adult,
Right.
and so they didn't want to get too close.
Yeah,
Isn't that terrible?
it's tough.
We live in such a different time today.
Yes.
It's crazy to think about.
Well,
Anyway.
in a time when we have AC and beautiful craft beer,
It's a golden era, really, if you think about it. Yeah.
no, well, hey, Tim, I really appreciate you sitting down with me and having a conversation about your story and Hugger Mugger. And it's a place that I love to frequent, especially now that I'm a resident. I'm 15 minutes down the road from you. You make some great stuff, and I can tell you're enthusiastic. You love the product. You love the community. So cheers to you and kudos to what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
I love it.
I can tell you and I could talk about this all day if need be.
No, well, I'll be back and we'll get David on.
Oh, that would be great. He would appreciate that too, and I think you would too. He's really he is the heart and soul of our beer program. He and Katie, and yeah, you would not only learn something, but also you would enjoy the conversation deeply. I can tell.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, hey, Tim, thank you so much, and it's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, cheers. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd really appreciate a follow and share on social media, subscribe to our YouTube, and be sure to give us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. Everything you see and hear is out of pocket for us, including travel. If you support our mission of showcasing the amazing stories behind these small businesses, do me a favor and head over to buymeacoffee.com/craftedconvos. Buy Me a Coffee is an awesome way to help creators like me with simple one-time donations or a monthly contribution. Every dime goes into giving these breweries, distilleries, and more some much-deserved limelight. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out. Cheers!